Chapter 1. The Day the Galaxy Chose War. The Galactic Council chamber floated at the heart of Asterion Prime like a jewel suspended in starlight. A transparent dome stretched overhead, revealing the glittering band of the Milky Way. Beneath it, representatives from 83 civilizations occupied tiered platforms arranged in concentric circles around a central podium. Species that breathe methane sat behind shimmering atmospheric shields. Aquatic delegates floated inside massive water-filled spheres. Silicon-based observers remained motionless, their crystalline bodies reflecting the chamber lights. Today, however, attention was fixed on a single topic: humanity. A holographic image of the human sphere of influence rotated above the podium. Hundreds of star systems glowed across the Orion Arm, connected by bright trade routes that looked like veins of light spreading through the darkness. Supreme Marshal Kareth Voss stepped forward. The Varkesh commander stood nearly 3 meters tall. Scars marked his gray skin, each one a symbol of military achievement. His crimson ceremonial armor carried enough medals to fill an entire display case. He studied the hologram for a moment before addressing the assembly. 2 centuries ago, he began, humans possess a handful of worlds and little influence beyond their borders. The image expanded. Trade routes multiplied. New colonies appeared. Industrial hubs lit up. Today they control the largest commercial network in known space. Murmurs spread through the chamber. Kareth continued. They claim peaceful intentions. They speak of cooperation and mutual prosperity. Yet their corporations supply half the council. Their cargo fleets enter every major system. Their infrastructure touches worlds that do not even belong to them. A representative from a small merchant species raised a tentacle. Supplying goods is not a crime, Marshal. No, Kareth replied calmly, but dependence is dangerous. Several military-aligned delegates signaled agreement. Humanity's rise had been difficult to ignore. While most powers expanded through conquest or political maneuvering, humans built shipyards, communication arrays, transportation networks, and energy facilities. They rarely threatened anyone. That made many leaders nervous. The representative of the Thal, Dominion, leaned forward. What evidence do you possess that humanity intends aggression? Kareth smiled slightly. Their intentions are irrelevant. The chamber quieted. Power changes behavior. Every species in this room knows that. The question is not whether humans will dominate the galaxy. He pointed toward the hologram. The question is whether we wait until they can. The statement hung in the air. Some delegates looked uncertain. Others seemed relieved to hear their concerns spoken aloud. Hours of debate followed. Arguments echoed through the chamber. Humanity's defenders highlighted centuries of peaceful relations. Opponents pointed to growing economic influence. By the end, fear outweighed caution. The vote was called. One by one, lights appeared around the chamber. Green, 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 more and more. The final tally materialized above the podium. War authorization approved. A wave of applause erupted from several sections. Kareth lowered his head in satisfaction. The Council's most powerful fleets would unite under his command. The campaign would begin within weeks. According to military projections, humanity would surrender shortly after its outer defenses collapsed. The outcome seemed obvious. Far away on Earth, nobody cared. At least not in the way the Council expected. The declaration arrived across every major network within minutes. News channels interrupted regular programming. Commentators discussed possible consequences. Experts offered predictions. Then the coverage gradually shifted elsewhere. A championship grab ball match occupied the evening headlines. Weather satellites tracked a storm moving across the Pacific. Financial analysts discussed quarterly shipping numbers. Life continued. In New York Arcology, commuters crowded transit platforms. In Nairobi Orbital, cargo elevators moved supplies to waiting freighters. On Mars, mining crews finished their shifts and headed home. Humanity had received the news. Humanity simply wasn't panicking. Thousands of kilometers above Earth, inside the Interstellar Logistics Coordination Center, Elena Ward sat at a conference table surrounded by projections. No military officers filled the room. No dramatic speeches echoed through command halls. The meeting looked painfully ordinary. A transportation specialist cleared his throat. The council declaration has been verified. Elena nodded. Expected. Another analyst glanced at a display. Should we elevate emergency status? We already did. The room exchanged puzzled looks. Elena pointed toward the data streams surrounding them. Cargo routes shifted. Manufacturing priorities changed. Reserve stockpiles unlocked. Backup networks activated. All automatically. Months of contingency planning had begun executing the moment the declaration arrived. A young coordinator frowned. That's it. Elena looked up. What exactly were you expecting? I don't know. Emergency broadcasts. Mobilization. Something dramatic. A few people laughed. Elena leaned back in her chair. The council thinks wars are won by fleets. And they're wrong. They're incomplete. She gestured toward the billions of tons of supplies moving across the network map. Civilizations survive because food arrives on time, because factories receive materials, because power stations stay online. The coordinator studied the glowing routes. What should we do now? Elena returned her attention to the reports. The same thing we always do. The room waited. Keep civilization running. Outside the station windows, thousands of cargo vessels quietly adjusted their courses. Across human space, factories revised production schedules. Supply chains reorganized themselves. No celebrations followed. No fear spread through the streets. Only preparation. Meanwhile, beyond the borders of human territory, the combined invasion fleet of the Galactic Council entered hyperspace. At its head stood Supreme Marshal Caravas. As stars vanished into blue-white tunnels around his flagship, he allowed himself a rare smile. The war had begun, and he was certain it would be short. Chapter 2. Humanity's Invisible Weapon. 3 weeks after the declaration of war, Supreme Marshal Caravas finally launched the opening strike. The attack unfolded exactly as planned. Council warships emerged from hyperspace above Helios 9, a remote mining system on the edge of human territory. Orbital defense platforms were overwhelmed within minutes. Mining stations vanished in expanding spheres of fire. Communication relays shattered into drifting debris. By military standards, it was a flawless operation. Aboard his flagship, Kareth watched the battle reports arrive. Enemy infrastructure destroyed. Resource extraction halted. Systems secured. The bridge crew exchanged satisfied looks. This was how wars were supposed to begin. Elsewhere, news networks across Council space celebrated the victory. Analysts predicted economic collapse inside human territory. Politicians praised the wisdom of the Council's decision. Kareth expected the next reports to confirm widespread disruption. Instead, something strange happened. Nothing changed. At first, the anomaly seemed insignificant. Then it became impossible to ignore. A logistics officer approached Kareth's command station. Marshal, we've detected increased cargo traffic. Kareth barely looked up. Rerouted ships escaping the combat zone. No, sir. The officer hesitated. The increase is system-wide. That got his attention. Explain. Human shipping activity has risen 12% since the attack. Silence spread across the bridge. Kareth frowned. That makes no sense. The officer looked uncomfortable. I agree, sir. On the opposite side of the war, Elena Ward reviewed the same data with considerably less concern. The destruction of Helios. 9 appeared on a holographic display. A mining director connected through a live feed. We lost the northern extraction platforms. Elena nodded. Replacement schedule? Construction drones arrived 6 hours ago. Good. We've also received equipment from 3 neighboring systems. Expected. The director blinked. That's all. Elena glanced at another report. Unless you discovered a second disaster, yes. The call ended. Around the room, dozens of specialists monitored supply networks spanning hundreds of star systems. Nobody seemed alarmed. A young analyst finally asked a question that had been bothering him all day. Director, aren't we supposed to be losing? Several heads turned. Elena smiled. Who told you that? The council. A few people laughed. Elena expanded a star map. Hundreds of glowing routes filled the room. Helios, 9 produced rare metals. She pointed toward nearby systems. So do these 14 worlds. Additional markers appeared. Those stations maintain reserves. More symbols emerged. Those shipyards can increase output. The network continued expanding. The analysts stared. There are backups for everything. No, Elena replied. There are backups for the backups. The room returned to work. Meanwhile, Kareth ordered a second offensive, then a third. Fuel depots, industrial platforms, deep space relays. Each operation achieved its objectives. Each target was destroyed. Each victory accomplished absolutely nothing. The pattern became impossible to dismiss. Human freighters continued moving. Factories remained active. Markets stayed stable. The economy somehow grew stronger. Council intelligence agencies began digging deeper. What they discovered was alarming. Humanity had spent generations building systems designed to survive catastrophe. Not military catastrophe. Any catastrophe. Natural disasters. Economic crashes. Solar storms. Pirate attacks. Equipment failures. Every lesson had been incorporated into infrastructure planning. Nothing depended on a single point of failure. A classified briefing arrived on Kareth's desk. He opened it expecting reassurance. Instead, he found a nightmare. Human civilian cargo fleets outnumbered several military navies. Automated manufacturing facilities existed in thousands of locations. Mobile shipyards could relocate and begin production within days. Entire asteroid belts had been converted into industrial reserves. The deeper analysts searched, the larger the network became. Kareth read the final page twice, then a third time. This cannot be accurate. It is, his intelligence chief replied. The figures have been independently verified. The marshal leaned back slowly. Why wasn't this reported before the war? The officer gave a humorless laugh. Because nobody was looking. Days later, Council fleet struck another cluster of human mining stations. The attack erased months of construction in less than an hour. Kareth waited for signs of disruption. They never arrived. Instead, new facilities appeared in neighboring systems. Fresh supply routes opened. Production recovered before the week ended. The numbers became absurd. Every blow landed. Every loss was replaced. Every prediction failed. Back at logistics coordination, a junior officer approached Elena's desk. Another attack report. She scanned it. Assessment: 82% infrastructure loss. Recovery estimate? The officer checked the figures. For days. Elena nodded. Proceed. The officer hesitated. What if they destroy another 100 stations? Elena finally looked up. Then we'll build 200. The answer wasn't confidence. It wasn't bravado. It was simple arithmetic. That reality terrified the council more than any weapon. Weeks later, a high-priority intelligence summary reached every senior official in the Galactic Council. Its conclusion occupied only a single sentence. Human logistics capacity exceeds the combined military logistics infrastructure of the 5 largest council powers. When Kareth finished reading, he stared through the observation window at the stars beyond. For the first time since the war began, uncertainty crept into his thoughts. The council believed it had declared war on a nation. The evidence suggested something far worse. They had declared war on a civilization that had spent 2 centuries preparing for problems exactly like them. Chapter 3. The war humanity refused to lose. The Galactic Council's patience finally ran out. Months of successful attacks had produced a humiliating result. Nothing. Human trade continued flowing across the Orion Arm. Industrial output remained strong. Colonies stayed supplied. Every prediction made before the war had collapsed under reality. Inside the council chamber on Asterion Prime, frustration replaced confidence. We have destroyed thousands of targets. One delegate snapped. Why are they still functioning? No one had an answer. Supreme Marshal Karavas stood in silence as accusations filled the hall. A few months earlier, these same leaders had praised him as an architect of an inevitable victory. Now they wanted explanations. What happens next, Marshal? Another representative demanded. Kareth activated a hologram. The display showed dozens of fleet formations gathering across council territory. We stopped fighting small engagements. The room quieted. We commit everything. A massive red arrow appeared across the star map. The largest military mobilization in Council history had begun. Thousands of warships, millions of personnel, resources gathered from every major member species. The objective was simple: break humanity's core systems in one overwhelming offensive. For the first time since the war began, even some human observers acknowledged the threat. Back at Interstellar Logistics Coordination, reports arrived by the minute. Fleet concentrations, supply stockpiles, mobilization routes. A junior planner stared at the growing list. That's a lot of ships. Elena Ward looked up from her console. Yes. You don't sound worried. She considered the statement. Worry doesn't improve planning. The planner sighed. I walked into that one. Several people chuckled before returning to work. Unlike the Council, humanity didn't focus on the number of enemy vessels. They focused on requirements: fuel, food, repair facilities, replacement parts, crew rotations. Every fleet depended on supply, and every supply chain could be measured. A massive tactical display filled the room. Red markers represented Council forces. Blue lines represented transport corridors. One analyst raised an eyebrow. That's interesting. What is? Elena asked. Their invasion fleet requires more fuel than 3 Council sectors produce in a month. The room grew quieter. Another specialist ran additional calculations. They're also stretching maintenance capacity. A third joined in, and spare component reserves. Elena nodded slowly. Then they're approaching their limits. Meanwhile, Kareth launched the offensive. The galaxy watched. Council armadas swept across human territory. Orbital facilities burned. Shipyards came under attack. Gate stations suffered heavy damage. This time the destruction was significant. News broadcasts showed explosions lighting entire systems. For a brief moment, it appeared the strategy might work. Then humanity adapted. Again, the response unfolded with astonishing speed. Freighters changed destinations overnight. Industrial platforms switched production lines. Dormant facilities activated across distant sectors. The Council would destroy a shipyard only to discover 3 more beginning operation elsewhere. What looked like a centralized economy revealed itself to be something entirely different. A living network. Every section capable of supporting the whole. Kareth received increasingly troubling reports. Target Delta restored. Target Sigma replaced. Target Kappa operational again. He slammed a hand against the command table. How? Nobody answered immediately. Finally, his intelligence chief spoke. Because they planned for failure. The words lingered. Not victory. Failure. Humans had assumed disasters would happen. Their civilization wasn't designed to avoid hardship. It was designed to survive it. As the campaign continued, Council losses mounted. Ships required repairs. Supplies dwindled. Replacement schedules fell behind. Human production moved faster than expected. Far faster. Then came the discovery that shattered what remained of Kareth's confidence. Long-range reconnaissance uncovered enormous industrial complexes hidden throughout uninhabited systems. Asteroid foundries, automated refineries, mobile construction yards. Many had never appeared on any Council map. The facilities worked continuously. No speeches, no propaganda, just endless manufacturing. A senior officer stared at the footage. Marshal, they've been building this for generations. Kareth watched thousands of construction drones swarming around a new shipyard. The scale was difficult to comprehend. Humanity hadn't prepared for this war after it started. Humanity had prepared before anyone imagined one would happen. Later that week, Kareth reviewed footage captured from a damaged human colony. He expected fear. Instead, he found volunteers. Engineers rebuilding transit hubs. Pilots delivering emergency supplies. Workers assembling replacement structures. Nobody appeared forced. Nobody seemed interested in glory. They simply showed up and got to work. Why? Kareth asked quietly. His intelligence chief looked confused. Why what? Why would civilians do this? The officer had no answer. Kareth continued watching. For the first time, he understood something fundamental. Humanity's strength wasn't hidden factories. It wasn't logistics software. It wasn't industrial capacity. Those were only tools. The real advantage was that billions of individuals willingly contributed to something larger than themselves. No decree compelled them. No threat motivated them. They believed in the system because they had built it together. Weeks later, Kara stood before a star map displaying the final phase of the war. One operation remained. One last chance. Every available fleet would strike directly into humanity's central territories. If the assault succeeded, victory remained possible. If it failed, the conflict was over. Around him, officers prepared for the largest battle in Council history. Kara studied the approaching routes. For the first time since the war began, he wasn't certain of the outcome. Across human space, Elena received the same intelligence. She read the report once. Then she smiled faintly. They're finally all coming. A planner glanced up. Is that good news? Elena closed the file. It means they're out of options. Beyond the stars, thousands of warships accelerated toward humanity's heart. The final offensive had begun. Chapter 4, The Last Offensive. The final offensive began with enough firepower to rewrite star maps. Thousands of Galactic Council warships emerged from hyperspace across multiple human systems. Sensor networks lit up with alerts. Strategic stations came under immediate attack. Shockwaves rippled through space as fleets exchanged fire around key transit corridors. For the first time in the war, humanity's central territories stood directly in the path of invasion. Aboard his flagship, Supreme Marshal Kareth Voss watched the operation unfold. Report. Primary assault groups have reached designated objectives. Resistance. Limited. A flicker of hope returned to the Marshal's expression. Months of frustration might finally end here. Human border defenses fell back in organized stages. Several orbital facilities were abandoned before Council forces arrived. Key installations appeared vulnerable. Kareth studied the tactical display. At last, the humans seemed to be losing ground. Then the situation started changing. Not dramatically. Not all at once. One supply convoy vanished from Council tracking. Then another. Then a third. Officers initially assumed navigational errors. They weren't. The convoys had simply been redirected. Human reconnaissance systems had mapped every invasion route long before the offensive began. As enemy fleets advanced, transport traffic quietly shifted around them. The flow never stopped. It simply moved elsewhere. At Interstellar Logistics Coordination, Elena Ward stood before a wall of data. Thousands of indicators updated in real time. Status. A logistics controller answered immediately. Sector 4 rerouting complete. Sector 7, replacement infrastructure operational. Fuel reserves, 93% capacity. Elena nodded, exactly as planned. Years of contingency modeling were finally paying dividends. Every likely invasion path had been studied. Every critical resource had alternatives. Every damaged facility had successors already waiting. The Council believed it was attacking vital organs. In reality, it was striking expendable layers. The deeper enemy fleets pushed, the worse their position became. Fuel consumption exceeded projections. Repair schedules slipped. Supply vessels struggled to keep pace. The armada was enormous, but size came with a cost. A fleet that large consumed staggering quantities of resources. Human analysts tracked those requirements with relentless precision. Soon shortages began appearing. First spare components, then reactor fuel, then ammunition. A Council admiral appeared on Kareth's command screen. We need additional resupply allocations. Denied. Marshal, several strike groups are operating below combat readiness. Maintain pressure. The admiral hesitated before saluting and ending the transmission. Hours later, 3 more requests arrived, then 7, then 12. The pattern was becoming impossible to ignore. Meanwhile, human cargo ships moved continuously between systems. Automated factories increased production. Mobile repair platforms followed defensive forces like shadows. Every damaged vessel returned to service quickly. Every destroyed installation was replaced. Every setback triggered a prepared response. Kara stared at the incoming reports. For months he had focused on fleets. Only now did he understand the battlefield. Wars weren't won by ships. Ships merely carried out decisions made elsewhere. The true struggle happened inside factories, warehouses, shipyards, and supply networks. Humanity dominated all of them. The realization arrived too late. 3 days into the offensive, Council forces began stalling. 5 days later, some formations lacked sufficient fuel for continued operations. On the 7th day, an entire attack group requested emergency extraction. Kara stood silently on the bridge. No officer dared speak. The tactical display told the story clearly. Human positions remained intact. Council strength was steadily declining. The offensive had failed, not because humanity destroyed the invasion fleet, because humanity outlasted it. At last, Kareth issued the order he never imagined giving. Signal all commands. The bridge crew froze. Marshal, transmit retreat instructions. No one moved. His voice hardened. That is an order. Moments later, the message spread throughout the Armada. Council fleets began withdrawing. The largest military operation in galactic history was over, and it had achieved nothing. Weeks later, representatives from across the Council arrived in human territory under flags of negotiation. Many expected demands, reparations, territorial concessions, punishment. Instead, they found Elena Ward sitting across a conference table, calm as ever. One delegate looked genuinely suspicious. Humanity is offering reconstruction assistance? Yes. Why? Elena folded her hands. Because damaged infrastructure helps nobody. The room fell silent. Even Kareth, attending as an observer, seemed confused after the meeting ended. He approached her privately. I still don't understand. Elena looked at him. Understand what? You won. We survived. Why help us? She considered the question for a moment. Then she smiled. Because rebuilding is always more useful than destroying. For the first time, Kareth had no argument. Months later, trade routes reopened. Former enemies exchanged goods instead of weapons. Shipyards that once supported military campaigns now worked on reconstruction projects. The galaxy slowly returned to normal. On Earth, a journalist interviewed Elena during the dedication of a new interstellar transit hub. Did you expect victory when the war started? She laughed softly. No. What did you expect? Elena glanced at the workers installing the final sections of the station. Work. The interview ended. Around her, cargo ships departed on schedule. Technicians completed inspections. Travelers moved through terminals without giving the recent war much thought. Life continued. Across the galaxy, one lesson remained impossible to ignore. The Galactic Council had declared war on humanity. Humanity had declared overtime. The end.